Do not go outside. Ignore all cries for help, no matter how human they sound," shouted Alex's dad. He pulled the cellar door over and paused to look back, and locked this door behind me. The door slammed shut. Alex locked it, walking down the stairs and stood alone in the darkness, moonlight shining through a crack under the door. The basement was freezing cold. She looked around the room. Nothing but junk. Toys from her childhood. Broken furniture her dad had refused to throw away. Stacks of books and newspapers and her grandparents' old possessions. She rummaged around and found her grandfather's reclining chair. Well, somewhere to sit at least, she thought. Alex dragged an old bike out of the way and pushed a chair towards the middle of the floor. As she searched through a chest of her grandmother's belongings, inside were a collection of porcelain figures, some knitting needles, and a hand mirror. Alex picked it up, wiped some dirt away, and looked at her reflection. Over her right shoulder, she saw a blanket and some cushions stashed underneath an old photo album. They stank and were covered in dust. Everything was, but it was better than sitting there freezing. She reclined back on the chair, wrapped a blanket around her, and tried to sleep. Alex was startled awake by something banging against the door. She pulled the blanket up towards her head and sat motionless. The banging stopped. As she was beginning to calm down, there was a gentle knock. Maybe it's just the wind, she told herself. Another knock, much louder than the first. There was a knot in the pit of her stomach. She tried to stay calm and told herself over and over it was the wind, but was so unnerved she retreated towards the corner of the basement and climbed behind a glass cabinet. "Hello?" cried a voice. Alex's eyes widened. She crouched even further behind the cabinet. "Hello? Is there anybody there? Please. I really need somewhere to hide." The voice was faint. Alex could barely make it out. The knocking became a loud banging. "Please, if anybody's down there, I need help." Alex's mind was racing. Who is this person? Why do they need help? Should I let them in? She thought. Her father's warning echoed in her mind. No matter how human they sound. What did he mean by that? Alex noticed the moonlight shining through along the bottom of the door. Maybe if I get close enough, I can see who it is, she thought. She walked slowly to the middle of the room, past a chair and towards the stairs. Alex was so fixated on the door, she tripped on a pile of books and crashed to the ground, knocking over the bike and a stack of newspapers. The banging stopped. "Hello? Is someone there? I can hear someone moving down there. Please, you have to let me in." The voice was much clearer now, but there was something peculiar about it. It sounded cold and emotionless, neither male or female, nor young or old. Alex moved to the bottom of the stairs, and eventually summoned the courage to speak. "Hello? Please, yes, hello. You have to help me. Can you let me in?" Alex didn't know what to do. The voice sounded desperate, but her dad's warning was clear in her mind. She was too nervous to get any closer. Yes, I'm here, but I'm not gonna open the door for you." "What? Why? There's something horrible running around out here. If you don't let me in, it'll get me. I'm in great danger. Please, open the door, quickly," cried the voice. Alex felt a sense of dread overcome her. "What do you mean something horrible is out there? Who are you?" "Look, there's no time for that now. I'm in danger, now. Why won't you let me in? Won't you help me?" The voice was getting angry. I won't." "What? Why?" Because before, my dad warned me not to open the door to anyone. That doesn't make any sense. Please just let me in. The banging against the door started again. What's out there? Why are you in danger? Open this damn door now! The voice growled. The banging stopped, and the gentle knocking started again. Alex was so scared she couldn't speak, and she didn't know what she would have said if she could. She didn't want to antagonize whoever it was outside any further. It sounded like they were furious. She looked at the crack beneath the door and had an idea. If I climbed the stairs and crouched down, I'll be able to look underneath. She'd maybe be able to see the person outside and what they looked like. She climbed the stairs quietly and crouched down along the door when the knocking stopped. She froze for a moment in uncertainty before laying down and peering out. There was nothing. All she could see was the back garden. She let out a sigh of relief. Maybe they were gone. She turned to walk down the stairs when there was another loud bang against the door. Alex jumped in fright and had to grab the railing to keep herself from falling. Please, I'm begging you, let me in. The banging continued. Catching her breath, Alex crouched down to look outside again. She still couldn't see anything. No feet, no legs, no anything. She saw nobody under the door, yet someone was furiously banging against it and begging her to let them in. Alex fought the urge to cry. Please, I know you're there. I'm in terrible danger. How can you just sit there and not let me in? Alex faced the door and tried to regain her composure. She had an idea. As the voice continued to plead for help, she crept down the stairs and opened her grandmother's old chest. She grabbed the hand mirror and returned to the door. Please, 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 the voice begged as the banging continued. Alex lay flat on her stomach and nervously pushed the mirror towards the door. She tilted and slid it around, trying to see as much as possible. No matter how she tried it, Alex couldn't see anyone. The pace of her breath quickened and she began to feel tightness in her chest. I am not opening this door. Before he left, my dad warned me not to open it for anyone. I don't know who you are, and I don't know why you're here. You shout about needing help and being in danger, but you won't explain why. But I told you, And besides, I can't see you underneath the damn door. You're hiding somewhere. I can see the back garden through the slit under the door with my mirror, but I can't see you. If you just want help, then why are you hiding? She pulled the mirror back and stood up. The voice began to laugh. You're smart to keep the door shut. Your dad was right to warn you. The voice sounded calmer this time. It was almost whispering. What do you mean? Who are you? I wasn't lying before. There is something horrible out here. You're just some maniac trying to scare me. Alex turned to walk back down the stairs. Oh, really? Put your mirror back down and have another look. Reluctantly, with a hand on the rail, Alex crouched down and peered through the crack again. Nothing. Her hand was trembling. You're still hiding. Why? Closer, the voice said, softly. Alex got down on her front and slid towards the door, straining to see as much as she could in the mirror. She could barely keep her grip. Almost there. Pausing for a moment, Alex took a deep breath and pressed her head as close to the door as she could. Then, sounding as though it were mere inches in front of her, the voice whispered, "Hello." Alex screamed in fright as the mirror was ripped from her hands and pulled away from her. She screamed again, and the voice started laughing. There was more banging, faster and with more force than ever. Alex raced back down the stairs. She crouched down behind the chair, stared at the door, and burst into tears. The banging kept getting louder. The cellar door sounded as though it was breaking apart. "I'm not letting you in. Go away. Go away." Alex collapsed behind the chair. She was at the point of hysteria. She stood over the chair and took a deep breath. What are you?" The banging stopped. "What difference does that make? You know I'm not out here and you won't let me in." The voice sounded amused. "Tell me what you are." "It would be much easier to show you. Why not open the door and I can—" "No," she screamed. "Tell me what you are. Tell me why I can't see you." The voice laughed and started banging on the door again. Alex climbed behind the cabinet, pulled the blanket over her head, and covered her ears with her hands. She rocked back and forth until she was calm enough to lie down. The banging turned into knocking, then got fainter and fainter, then stopped completely. She tried to calm herself down and return her breathing to normal. She lay still for what felt like minutes, or maybe it was hours, in silence, not quite sure whether she was awake or asleep. There was another knock at the door, less violent than before. "Alex, Alex, are you there?" It was her father's voice. She crept out from behind the cabinet, looked at the door, and saw sunlight shining through. "Alex, it's Dad. Alex, are you there? Please, please tell me you're alright." She leapt out from behind the furniture and looked at the stairs. Under the door, she could see the shadow of her dad standing outside. Alex let out a sigh of relief and raced up the stairs. "Dad, where were you? There was something outside and it was trying to get me to open the door." "Alex, honey, thank God you're safe. Come open the door. We have to get out of here now." She undid the lock and burst through the door, ready to hug her dad. She let out a cry of relief. "Dad, Alex looked around in confusion. She couldn't see her dad anywhere. The garden was empty. "Dad? Dad?" She was overcome with terror. Alex ran back into the basement, slammed the door shut, and bolted the lock. She shot back down the stairs and stood quivering in the room. She frantically looked around, making sure she was alone. Some books collapsed from the pile in front of her, and she screamed. Just some books, she thought. She tried to catch her breath. Feeling a sense of unease, Alex climbed back beneath the cabinet and pulled the blanket over her head. There was a gleeful whisper, "So nice of you to let me in." It was a Tuesday morning, which meant that it was Bobby's day to take the kids to school. I watched him drive off in his Camry, then closed the door, went into the kitchen, and poured out a much-needed cup of coffee. I wasn't very far into it, and was still half asleep, when my doorbell rang. I muttered something, stood up, and tightened up my bathrobe. On the way to the door, I caught a look at myself in the hallway mirror. I looked like shit. Bags under my eyes, crazy colic sticking up on the top of my head, a patchy and ugly beard beginning to take over my face. I sighed and opened the door. To my complete bewilderment, a sharply dressed and made-up woman was standing there, with a man holding a camera just behind her. "Good morning, Mr. Clark," she said. "I'm Jackie Ling, with WAKZ-TV. I apologize for the short notice, but we are doing a segment on single fathers, and I would like to interview you for it." I couldn't believe it. Jackie Ling. I watched her on the TV every evening, and sometimes thought about her later, when I was in bed alone. Sure, I said. Can I have a few minutes to clean up?" Jackie looked me over and then smiled. "No," she said. "This is perfect. Just what we were looking for. I'll bet your mornings are pretty busy, aren't they?" "Well," I began. "Hold on," she said, turning her head to the man behind her. "Jim, start rolling." She held the microphone up to my face. I felt a little lightheaded and embarrassed. "Well," I said, "to tell the truth, yes. Mornings are pretty rough. On days when I have the kids." "Great," said Jackie, holding up her hand. "Tell us a little about that." I spoke with Claire Brown, head of the PTA, and she told me about the rather unique arrangement that you have with your neighbor. "Can you tell us about that?" "Sure," I said, relaxing just a little bit. "See, Bobby, he's a single dad like me. That's Robert McHugh. Yes, Robert McHugh. He lives right there," I said, pointing from the open doorway across the street to his house. "He has 2 boys, I have 1. So one day, we were both at the park down the street with the kids, and we recognized each other and started talking, sort of commiserating, you know?" "Commiserating?" repeated Jackie. "That's good. Go on." "So we decided that we would try something out. I would have the kids for one day, and Bob would take them the next. They'd come over in the morning, and I'd drive them to school, then pick them up in the afternoon. They'd do their homework and play or whatever, and I'd feed them dinner, you know, get them ready for bed, all that. Then in the morning, I'd get them ready for school, make them eat their breakfast, pack their lunches, make sure they're dressed. Then I'd send them across the street, and Bob would take over for the day. And am I right in guessing that you had the boys last night and spent this morning getting them ready?" asked Jackie. "Yeah, that's right," I said. "Can you tell me a little bit how you feel now that the boys are gone?" she asked. "Well, you know, it's always a little sad sending them off in the morning. We have such a good time together, you know?" "Jim, cut," said Jackie to the cameraman. "And you, Mr. Clark, I'm sorry, but I'm going to need you to cut too. Cut the shit." What? I asked, shocked. "Have you ever watched my segment before?" "Sure," I said, "every night." "Good," said Jackie. "Then you know I don't do fluffy bullshit. I take on real issues, affecting real people, and present them in a real way. I'm looking at you now, and do you know what I see?" "What do you see?" I asked nervously. "I see a good man, giving his all to 3 young boys, and you look like shit." She laughed. "Excuse me, you're actually a good-looking dude. Very good-looking dude. And if I weren't married," she laughed again, "but you have bags under your eyes. You look like you haven't slept for a week. You've got to be honest here. The whole point of the segment is how hard it is to be a single father raising a child on his own in modern America." Okay, I understand." "Good," said Jackie. "Jim, roll." She paused a beat and then asked again, "So how do you feel now that the boys are gone?" "Well, to be honest," I said, "I'm a little relieved." I watched as Jackie gave a big smile and an encouraging nod. Sometimes it gets a little overwhelming and, you know, 3 boys, just nonstop energy, and they don't listen to you. It can get overwhelming. I just need a break. And now I get one, and I get to regather myself." "Perfect," said Jackie. "So, you know, the arrangement is great. I get that break, and by the next day, I'm ready to do it again. Is it though? Asked Jackie. Is the arrangement great? Sure, I said. But by my count, Mr. McHugh has 2 boys, and you only have 1. Hardly seems fair. No, it's fine, really. Cut, said Jackie. Come on, Mr. Clark. We've been through this. I need honesty. I'm not going to badmouth Bobby on TV, I said. I don't think you understand what a goldmine of a story this is, said Jackie. Every family has its tensions. Mom feels like Dad isn't pulling his weight around the house. Maybe. And Dad is maybe a little resentful that he has to pay the lion's share of the bills. We want to show that you, as a single father, also face these pressures in your relationship with your neighbor. Don't worry. We will fill in the narrative around the interview and portray the relationship as the wonderful thing that it is. But we need that tension, Mr. Clark. It's not a story without that tension. I hesitated, frowning. All right, I said uncertainly. If you're sure. I mean, I don't want to hurt Bobby's feelings. You won't, said Jackie. I promise. Now, you ready? I nodded. Roll it, Jim. Well, I said, you know, I always did feel like the relationship was a little lopsided. I mean, here I am. I'm buying food for 3 kids, and only one of them is mine. And Bobby, he buys food for 3 kids, and 2 of them are his. Gold, said Jackie. But I just want to stress that Bobby is... Okay, Mr. Clark, that's everything we need. Tune in tomorrow about 6:15 p.m. to watch the segment. I can't thank you enough for your time. Sure, I said, feeling lightheaded again. And I meant it, said Jackie, as Jim turned and walked back to his news van with his camera. If I weren't married. She winked, and I watched her walk away. I kept that image of her behind, swaying down my driveway in my mind, and a few minutes later, in the shower, I used it to help release the intense and mounting pressure that I was feeling that morning. The next day, I went to pick the kids up at school, but Bobby's kids weren't there. Only Tommy, my son, was. Where are the boys? I asked him as he got into my car. Bobby picked them up at lunch, said Tommy. He looked scared. That's weird, I said, more to myself than to Tommy. He didn't mention anything to me. I think something's wrong, Dad. No, buddy, I said, pulling out of the parking lot. I'm sure they're fine. Probably just wanted to treat the kids. I'll admit, I felt a little pissed off. If they were off doing something fun, why hadn't Bobby taken Tommy? But then I thought about how much easier it would be taking care of 1 kid that night, rather than 3, and I calmed down. We got home, ate dinner, and then I turned on the TV at 6:14 p.m. Jackie was sitting at the anchor's desk, as the anchor was finishing something up. Understand that you have some footage possibly related to the case to share with our viewers. Well, said Jackie, looking serious and sad. I can't say anything about the case, but yes, I do have some footage related to the family. You spoke with Robert McHugh's neighbor, shortly after Mr. McHugh picked up his children at school. Is that right? That's correct, said Jackie, looking into the camera. And it's not my place to make accusations. I've spoken with the police about this, and, well, the footage was for a segment that we had planned on single fathers. As such, it's within our rights to air the footage. But, well, All that I can say is that when I arrived at Mr. Clark's house, something seemed off. What do you mean? He seemed very distraught, said Jackie. Well, that's all that I can say. My God, let's just air the footage. I sat on the couch next to Tommy, my mouth hanging open, my brain scrambling to figure out what I was witnessing. Why did they say that bit about Bobby picking up the kids? Why did she say that the interview happened that day instead of the one before, when it had actually happened? Why the fuck were they talking about the police? Then the screen filled up with an image of me, looking like shit in my bathrobe. So how do you feel now that the boys are gone? Asked Jackie on the screen. Well, to be honest, I said, up there on the TV, I'm a little relieved. Sometimes it gets a little overwhelming and, 3 boys, just non-stop energy, and they don't listen to you. It can get overwhelming. I just need a break. And now I get one, and I get to regather myself. I watched as I went on explaining the relationship that I had with Bobby and how we had worked it out at the park down the street. The screen cut back to the anchorman. Is that the same park where the bodies of the McHughes were discovered? He asked. Jackie appeared to shudder. Yes, she said. Then it cut back to the footage. Well, I was saying, I always did feel like the relationship was a little lopsided. I mean, here I am. I'm buying food for 3 kids, and only one of them is mine. And Bobby, he buys food for 3 kids, and 2 of them are his. I never got to watch the end of this segment. There was a loud knock on the door. "This is the police," said a loud voice. "Open up, Mr. Clark. We need to talk." You have to believe me. I didn't do it. It happened just like I said. I was interviewed by Jackie Ling the day before the McHughes were slaughtered and cut to pieces in the park. She knows this, but she's claiming that the interview happened after the murder, and the cameraman is backing her up. Logs from the station backed her up too. The only footage that remains is the bit that was shown on TV. The rest of it, the parts that had all the exonerating context, has been deleted. They found a large knife at the crime scene that has my prints on it, but Bobby and I borrowed things from each other all of the time. The killer, the real killer, could have taken it from Bobby's home and planted it there. I've explained all of this to my lawyer. He says that I'm best off confessing and taking the best deal I'm offered, though he's doubtful that I'll be offered anything. But that's bullshit, because I didn't do it. I don't know who did it, but I know that Jackie Ling and her cameraman are lying. My lawyer says that there's no case there. No connection between them and the McHughes. I haven't seen Tommy since I was arrested. He's staying with my sister in Maryland. She's the only one who believes me. She says that I need to get this story out there. Get the public on my side. I mean, my lawyer says that it's bad out there. After that segment aired, everyone from my town wants my head. But my sister is hopeful that if I get this out there to the broader public, things could change. So I'm writing this all down and sending it out to her. I hope that you believe me. I had the wide-eyed, idolized version of what college living would be like. I'm a bit of an introvert, but I was hoping that shipping from home would be a way for me to turn that around. No one would know me where I was going. No one would remember that I pissed my pants in gym. No one would remember that time I asked out the pretty girl from high school. And no one would remember my mental breakdown after getting rejected that forced me to take school off for a few years and focus on myself. In fact, as far as anyone reading this is concerned, none of that happened. Forget it. I was a blank slate. The case of the strange penny-sized hole in my small one-room apartment was nothing out of the ordinary. I wasn't so much concerned with its existence as I was with the fact that I would not be in a dorm room, forced to share the place with some jock-mouth breather. Plenty of apartments came with flaws, and this was nothing out of the ordinary. The real problem arose when I noticed that there was an identical penny-sized hole in the exact same spot on the wall across from it. When I initially examined it, I concluded that perhaps my apartment room had once housed plumbing, but when I hunkered down to look into them, I could see that they did seem to go entirely through the wall, but I could make out nothing more than the faintest light on the other side. This was nothing out of the ordinary, as the complex I lived in had once been an industrial factory, so maybe they filled them from the other side. Still strange. As I looked from the doorway at the hole in the left wall and the hole in the right wall, I felt a strange buzzing sensation in my ears. It was like the sounds of an electric razor lodged in my brain. I ignored this, of course, and placed my bed so that it only touched one wall directly across from my doorway, a few feet away from either hole. Still though, the holes in my room were a constant sight of embarrassment, if only to me, so I decided to cover them with post-it notes. I wouldn't have to live there long, and I could always cover them later more permanently. Things went on. I took my medication. I went to classes. I learned how to communicate with people in my apartment building with varied successes. For me, drinking had never really been an option when thinking of college. Of course not. You know, I wanted something else. Something different. I wanted to lose my virginity. And the girl in the room directly next to mine was as socially inept as I was when it came to speaking with people. I could just tell. The way she averted her eyes, the way that she hid behind her hair, the way that she smiled meekly at every little thing that others said. I knew this girl was a primary target. I locked my sights on her and would sometimes, every so often, press my ear to the wall we shared and listen to her breathing. I swear, she must have slept with her bed pushed directly against the wall and her back right on the drywall, because I honestly could hear her breathing when she slept. What can I say? I'm a romantic. Then came the long audible sounds of pleasure coming from the other side of the wall. It had to have been her. I found myself fantasizing over what sort of whirring mechanism she used on herself to produce such wonderful vocal performances. Though, now that I think about it, her voice never came out as crisp and clean as it did when I would pass her in the halls, and I never did hear her say any words. It was only that low animalistic growling or lip smacking. Still, call it a psychic connection. I knew she wanted to come through the wall. When I would pass her by, I could see that the bags under her eyes had grown swollen and purple. Her face was flushed and her hair unkempt. Of course. I knew why even if no one else did. She hardly got any sleep at all. Then came our serendipitous meeting in the elevator, where I accidentally struck the emergency stop button with my elbow. She didn't notice, but watching her face go panicked let me know that I had her in a vulnerable position. So I asked her out, and she said yes. I'll tell you, once the maintenance woman let us out, I had an entirely new spring in my step. I had a date. We met at a local pub and I sipped on my beer while urging her to drink as well. I'm not much of a drinker, but the nerves were getting to me and I totally intended to find myself in a room later that night. I wanted nothing more than to see the sort of secrets such a mild-mannered young woman could hide. Have you noticed the noises at night? They've been keeping me up at night. It's so hard to sleep. She thumbed her fingers across the booth table we sat at while watching me with glossed eyes and rose cheeks. I figured I couldn't have looked any more sober than her. I assumed this was her way of bringing up the noises I'd heard all those many nights since moving into the place. Was this her attempt to tell me that she knew I'd been listening to her? I played it cool. Oh, yeah. I've been having trouble sleeping too. The noises are a bit much in that old building, aren't they? Her eyes sparkled. So, I'm not crazy? I thought maybe I'd been hearing the noises in my own head, but it sounds like they're coming through the walls. What do you think they could be? My lips offered a wry smile. You haven't the faintest idea? Huh? I covered my smile with a sip of beer. Her piano-playing fingers clung to her strands of hair anxiously, tugging out a clump. As she noticed she was holding onto hair no longer connected to her head, she tossed it to her feet and kicked it out of sight. Her beer was gone seconds after, and she quickly ushered over the waiter for another. I don't know. There was a lowness in her spirits that I noticed for the first time. Something clicked in my head. She wasn't playing hard to get. I could tell that she had no idea where the noises were coming from. My stomach slipped and pushed on my bowels. I ignored my initial plans of getting into this girl's room for the sexy time. Do you have holes on your side of the wall? I asked. There's a few nail or screw holes. Why? I could feel my expression squish into a more wrinkled and concerned one. How big are they? I don't know. I blurted out the next words. Can I come to your room tonight? The waiter arrived with her fresh beer, and he noticed the agitated way in which I'd asked the question. I could tell he was cutting his eyes at me, but I didn't care anymore. Something far more interesting than the prospect of sex had come up. She eyed me for a moment before shrugging. Whatever. We arrived at the apartment complex, and it felt like a new place entirely. It was no longer cheap student housing, but a place with dark secrets. The night air was cold. As we entered the building, the chill tickled up my arms. As we came to the hallway with our rooms, we shared a glance. She pushed her key in, and we fell into the room. Her bed was against the wall, opposite the one we shared. Holy shit, I whispered. What? She asked, visibly confused. Nothing. I played it cool. Against the wall we shared, I could see she pushed a metal frame futon against it. She closed the door behind us. Do you ever sleep on that? I asked while motioning to the futon. She shook her head, her hands instinctively grasping onto her hair once more. Nope. Without asking, I threw myself violently at the futon, scooting it from the wall to expose nothing. So what? Right? So what? There's a couple impossible holes in my room. That doesn't mean it's the end of the world. I did something that I'd not done in my whole life. I grabbed her clammy little hand. She let out an audible gasp at my touch, but I rushed her from the room and took us to my room, shoving the door in. There they were. The post-it notes I covered them with now rested upon the floor. They were gaping at me, nearly breathing. I locked the door behind us, feeling the cool sweat roll down my forehead. As I whipped from the door, I saw Shiari approach the hole on the wall we shared. Holy shit, she hushed, while reaching out and touching the outer edges of the pulsating hole's raised flesh. They've never done that before. I approached behind her and peered over her shoulder. Can you hear that? She asked, while looking over her shoulder. Hear what? I asked. They're speaking. She continued tracing her finger around the hole. Do they normally speak? My mind shot to the times I was certain that she was somehow physically linked to me. No, of course not. They're just stupid holes. She pushed her index finger in and immediately gasped. Oh, I jumped, certain that something terrible was happening. What? That feels amazing. I raised an eyebrow and looked at the hole. It had conformed its way halfway up her index finger. Suckling. I could hear it, suckling. This is so cool, she said. Then the room was filled with ridiculous suction, that mechanical whir, and the sounds of bones snapping. It was a blinding noise, and I clasped my hands over my ears. I could feel a nosebleed coming on, and before I knew it, the whole front of my shirt was covered in my own blood. I squinted through my tears at her. She was screaming. The wall had taken her to her knees, and its mouth now enveloped her arm to the elbow. There was blood and shredded viscera coming from around the hole, like a person spitting watermelon seeds. I reached out for her without thinking. I only meant to help, but my fingers tangled around her hair and tore it away in clumps. As I stared down at the mass of tangled hair in my fingers, I screamed. She'd been taken at her waist and her screams were long gone, but the sounds of the impossible hole continued its consumption of the limp legs. Knees, ankles, toes, she was gone, and the hole slowly shrank to its average penny size. Shaking, I took myself from the room, hearing nothing as I went. I was imprisoned in a daze as I went down the hall to the communal bathroom. While I washed myself in the sink with the door locked, I nearly convinced myself that I'd made it all up. It was another strange manifestation of mine. That's all. After tossing my bloody shirt in the trash, I returned to my room. Upon seeing the oozing blood dribble from the wall hole that had consumed her, I knew I hadn't made it up. I stood there, with my back pressed against the door. The next thing I heard was a strange gurgling. My eyes locked on the carnivorous wall hole, but it wasn't coming from there. I slowly turned my head to focus on the hole on the opposite wall. It puckered like a sphincter, and it came from that hole in a stream akin to hot diarrhea. Who could I tell? I'll be thrown in prison for sure. I'm prime suspect numero uno. I told precisely no one, and the walls call to me. My brain is on fire. I can feel that whirring all the time. The dark web. The name itself is a meme. It's become the boomer boogeyman, the back alley of the internet where you go to get your kidneys harvested and sold off to billionaires all-you-can-torture buffet. It's the skeezy part of town, the no man's land of the digital world, chock full of society's most vile scum. It's also pretty boring. See, the dark web really isn't that much different than the surface web. Sure, it has a cooler name and better privacy, but most people use it for the same shit. Social media? Check. Shopping? Check. Pirating movies? Duh. Did you know Facebook exists on the dark web? You do now. My parents are terrified of the dark web. They speak about it hushed breaths, sort of like Ron Weasley talks about Lord Voldemort. It's as though they think uttering its name too loudly will invoke the wrath of some serial hacker, just waiting in the wings to delete their bank accounts. Ridiculous, right? I told them they were paranoid. To prove them wrong, I even downloaded the Tor browser and uninstalled Google Chrome. There's nothing to fear on the dark web, I said, so long as you've got half a brain's worth of sense in you. Now I wish I could take it all back. I stumbled across the website after a long night of drinking. I'd been out with Jared, my best friend since childhood, reminiscing about the good old days of driving Miss Crabtree up the wall. When I got home, I felt a bit nostalgic, so I went digging for old pictures on Facebook. Like most drunk missions, one thing led to another, and I landed on an old thread listing the most exciting websites on the dark web. Most were fairly vanilla. Some free textbooks here, a bit of hacked video games there. I scrolled down through the responses until I found one buried beneath the others. It had just a single upvote, monstercall.onion. I stared at the link for a few seconds, then cracked a fresh beer and said fuck it. The website was plain, mostly white text on a black background. Across the top was a banner emblazoned with the words "Call your monsters." I cracked a grin. It was kinda cute, in an edgelord, emo kinda sorta way. After clicking through a few menu links, I landed on the Order a Monster page. It said that for $99, they would deliver a personalized monster to a doorstep of my choice. Free shipping too. The flavor text read, "Perfect for getting even with terrible bosses, backstabbing friends, and childhood enemies." I laughed. The idea was absolute gold. They even had a monster call guarantee of same-day shipping. How they managed to pull that off, I had no idea. Maybe they had a network of paid actors, patiently waiting to dress up in Halloween costumes and say a few canned lines on somebody's doorstep. Or maybe it's like Build-A-Bear, where you got to design your own stuffed version of ghouls like Dracula and the Wolfman. Whatever it was, I decided I was far too drunk to give a shit about how they made it happen. All I knew was $100 was a damn steal. I smashed the order button and it brought me to the follow-up page titled, "Design Your Monster." I practically licked my lips. This was the juicy bit. The website gave me a drop-down list of selectable options based on modifiable body parts. The mouth, for instance, had fangs, broken teeth, no mouth, multiple mouths, and too many teeth. I thought the idea of too many teeth sounded ridiculous enough to be awesome, so I picked that and went down the list and selected the rest of the monster's attributes, including its body type, its subspecies, and finally its power. The next page said leave a message. I mulled it over for a few minutes before deciding to keep it simple. I typed, "Boo," into the text field. Once I was finished, I clicked complete, and it brought me to a new screen that made me jump. It was a webcam video of me, staring shocked at my laptop. The stream was live. At the top of the page, a red text banner proclaimed "Perform the blood sacrifice." I cocked an eyebrow. What? As if in answer to my confusion, a list of instructions faded into view on the bottom of the screen. Number 1. Utter the name of your recipient. 2. Pierce your skin. 3. Consume your blood. I burst out laughing. This was too wild. Not only were they gonna deliver a monster to somebody's doorstep, but they were gonna include a goofy ritual video too. Alright, I decided, I'm game. I went downstairs and grabbed a knife from the kitchen drawer and headed back up to my room. Holding my hand up with a coy grin, I pricked my thumb with the tip of the blade. "Jared Mayhew," I announced dramatically. I stuffed my blood thumb into my mouth and sucked it clean. Then I held it up, drunk and proud, as evidence of my dark ritual complete. Seconds passed and nothing happened. Then, the screen went black and a new page appeared. Order complete. Delivery in progress. I sipped my beer, wondering how Jared would react to my spooky surprise landing on his doorstep tomorrow. I really hope they included the blood sacrifice bit. Jared and his wife, Alyssa, both hated blood, so they'd never let me live it down, and that was exactly what I wanted. A couple seconds later, a new screen popped up. Delivery complete. Stand by for results. Already? That didn't make any sense. How did they manage to create my order and ship it across the country, all in the span of 5 minutes? A depressing realization swept over me. My drunk ass had been duped. There was no way they'd be able to ship something that quickly. So the only explanation was A, it was a scam, or B, it was just some lame email jump scare. Fuck. Now the $99 made more sense. There was no way a tiny startup could offer the same-day delivery and a compelling product for so little money. It was a pipe dream logistically. Defeated, I decided that was enough dark web shopping for one night and time to pack it in. I closed my laptop, brushed my teeth, and hopped into bed. My phone vibrated. I stared at it, wondering who would be messaging me at this hour. Jared, maybe? He's just as drunk as I was and probably high as a kite by now too. I picked it up and saw one new email from Monster Call. Odd. I never gave them an email address. Order delivered. Click here to view results. This was either a virus or some guarantee that Jared got a corny, spooky email. Still drunk, still making poor decisions, I clicked the link and it opened a video feed of Jared's house. I sat up, my tiredness vanishing in a tidal wave of what the fuck. The video was dimly lit, and the way it bobbed up and down looked like it was being recorded off somebody's cell phone. Jared's small, two-bedroom home was there in all of its suburban glory. Something about the video felt off though. Wrong. I told myself to relax. This was just some prank or gag. The company probably put on a call for a fraction of the money to any locals, and somebody pulled the contract. No doubt, they were going to walk up to the front steps, knock on his door, and then say boo, and run off or some shit. It wasn't a big deal, so why was my heart racing? The video neared the house, the footsteps going slowly. In the silence of the night, I heard the person behind the camera breathing. They sounded frightened, scared. Why? Lights went on inside the house, painting the windows in a dull yellow glow. I squinted, seeing dark shapes darting behind the curtains. Thoroughly confused, I decided to message Jared and ask if he got my surprise. Terrence. Sup, dude? You get my special delivery? Haha. Jared. Help. Jared. Something. Jared. Inside the house. Dark splotches splattered against the curtains. A moment later, a woman's scream rang out, and the window shattered. Two hands reached out from behind the billowing curtains, gripping the side of the windowsill. Then two more gripped the top. A figure emerged, lurching out of the opening and into the yard. It looked familiar. Jesus Christ, it looked familiar. It stood 8 feet tall, with large bat wings flared out behind it, and 4 crooked, muscular arms clenching in and out a fist. The person behind the camera stumbled backward, muttering something incoherent. The creature swiveled its head toward them. The video feed shifted. Images of the sidewalk flew up and down as the cameraman ran full tilt from Jared's house. I caught muffled fragments of prayers. Then a shriek sounded, followed by the flap of powerful wings. The video crashed, tumbling in a blur of pixels. A man's voice shouted for help, and then something heavy crunched, and his voice died with a wheeze. Another shriek filled the night, and a shadow appeared, gazing down towards the cell phone. It had 4 arms, a pair of wings, and a mouth filled with rows and rows of teeth. Too many teeth. I lurched forward, swallowing the vomit in my throat. In one of the creature's arms was a 30-something man, struggling wordlessly against the monster's might. His chest looked like it had been caved in. The creature leaned towards him, pressing his teeth against his face, and slowly bit down. The man's legs kicked and jolted as the beast's teeth began rotating like a blender, tearing his flesh from his skull. It dropped him there, convulsing and dying, then beat its great wings and took off into the sky. Moments later, I heard confused shouts. Footsteps pounded against the pavement. More hollers. People called for the police. I put my phone down, horrified. It had to have been a joke. There simply was no way that it had actually happened. It couldn't have. It was too gruesome, too violent. That was digital effects all the way. It had to be. They were great at those these days, weren't they? The next day I got a call from Jared's parents. His mother tried to talk, but she couldn't get past the tears, so she put Jared's father on the line. He explained that something terrible happened last night. My heart slammed in my chest. What happened? I asked. I told myself to relax, that there was nothing to worry about. Monsters didn't exist. I knew that. Terrence, he said quietly. This isn't easy to talk about, and it's harder to hear. But last night, somebody broke into Jared and Alyssa's home. Police think it was sometime around 2 in the morning. My jaw hung limp, my hand trembling as I held the phone to my ear. A terrible coincidence. That's all it was. A terrible, horrible coincidence. I don't know how to say this, he said, so I'm just gonna come right out with it. He took a deep breath, shuddering breath, and when he spoke again, his voice was as fragile as glass. The intruder that broke in, he mutilated them. Mutilated? I said in a small voice. Oh my God, Jesus. Yes, I'm sorry to tell you all this, but you were his, well, you were best friends, and I think it's better that you hear this from me than the newspaper. He paused, as though summoning the courage to say the next words. According to the police, the psychopath that broke in gnawed their faces off. Vomit rose in my stomach. I forced it down. Oh Christ, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I ran a hand through my hair, gripping it forcefully and pulling on it, praying the pain would wake me from this nightmare. Please, Roger, let me handle the funeral preparations. You and Charlene should take this time to grieve. That's the thing, Roger said, his voice tremoring with emotion. There won't be a funeral. What? They're still alive. Terrence, that son of a bitch left them, broken and bleeding, to live with the torture he influenced on them. He choked back a sob before recomposing himself. So far there's no trace of the bastard. The only lead the cops have is a crumpled note they found on the doorstep. He left a note? Yeah, but it was just one word. Practically useless. I swallowed. What did it say? Boo. You have to be quiet. Your grandmother is asleep in the attic, whispered my mother as we crept through the front door. Why is she being so dramatic? I thought to myself. Why did you wait 17 years to tell me I had a grandmother who lived in a creepy old backwoods house? I demanded of her. My mother shushed me, hurriedly ushering me through the house and into the basement. If the surprise road trip to a surprise house with a surprise grandmother was a strange start to my day, the basement just piled on the weird. Being padded cloth walls, thick red carpet, giant soft couches supporting a mountain of pillows and clashing prints. This place looks like a porn set from the 70s had terrible taste. How do you know what a porn set from the 70s looks like? Countered my mother. I rolled my eyes at her. Sometimes I think she believes the internet is a figment of my imagination. This room is soundproofed, to prevent us from disturbing and waking up your grandmother." "About that," I replied. "Why didn't I know I still had a grandmother? I thought she was dead. Are there any other family members you're hiding in the Hicks?" Ignoring my snarky tone, my mother answered, "Your grandma? She's special. She's not from here. She was a young orphan ferried over from a world away. No name, no money, and no memory. Her life was really hard growing up. This country can be unforgiving to anyone they see as different." Hearing that, there was a twinge of empathy for my grandmother. I've always felt different my entire life, and people could be cruel. But then she met your grandfather, and it was love at first sight for the both of them. They got married very young and had me really early. My mother smiled wistfully. We three mostly just had each other this far out, but it was a great childhood. Constantly outdoors helping mom grow food or helping dad maintain the house. I had hoped for the same when I had you. It didn't skip my notice that my mother had used mom and dad to refer to my grandparents for the first time. Once I moved to the city, I didn't visit as much, so I never realized. Your grandmother got sicker the older she got, started to lose her sight and smell, had to take long naps. It was a strain on your grandfather, but he insisted of taking care of her himself, making me promise to do the same if he died first. So on the weekends when you're with your dad, I come over, clear up the weeds, stock some food, do the laundry, and now that you're old enough, you can help me," she ended. "You still haven't explained why you never told me about her," I retorted. "No, I didn't. How about we stop at the diner you like on the way home, and I'll tell you the rest over pancakes and bacon. For now, just be really quiet as you walk through the house and stay on the ground floor. You can work outside weeding the garden while I finish up the laundry here." She tossed me a pair of gardening gloves, shooing me away. Maybe if I wasn't such a curious, stubborn brat, things would have gone very differently that day. But a secret grandmother? How many people would be capable of sauntering off to yank some weeds with a mystery like that left unsolved? Determined to meet her, I headed up to the attic. For an old house, nothing creaked. Climbing the stairs was silent, the carpet dampening my footsteps. As I stood in the entryway to the attic, I struggled to get a clear look at the sleeping form on the bed, the hazy light weakening quickly with the setting sun. "Screw it," I thought. "Grandma?" I said, barely above a whisper. She didn't move. I took a step forward. "Grandma," I said loudly. At first nothing stirred. Then the whisper of sheets being slid from a body. A creak of joints as the figure on the bed sat up straight, head swiveling side to side in the deepening shadows. A harsh groan escaped her as her feet touched the floor, followed by a raspy throttle as my grandmother hunched over on all fours. Her bones cracked and bent and warped, each arm and each leg at opposite angles to each other, while her head gradually began twisting around to find the source of the noise. With each jerking twist of her head, I felt myself shrinking deeper and deeper into myself, praying she didn't see me, praying that I could be quiet enough to be invisible. When her head turned completely around, her eyes locked onto mine. No flicker of humanity shone in those primal depths. They were deeper and darker than the infinite night sky. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I barely breathed. She inched spasmodically towards me, the direction of the last sound she heard. Closer and closer. I didn't feel the trickle of urine run down my leg. Closer and closer. A scream started crawling up the back of my throat. Closer and closer. Then she was close enough to smell wet, putrid earth underlaid by hints of lavender, mixed with the coppery tang of fetid blood. I nearly broke but was saved by a loud bang from outside. A hunter's gunshot perhaps, or a car backfiring on a distant road. It jolted my grandmother to action. She opened her mouth in a silent shriek, almost like the sound had physically hurt her in some way, and bolted to the window, shattering the glass as she jumped through it in pursuit of the source of the noise. It felt like an eternity before I could force myself to move again. When my limbs finally worked, I ran to the basement, hurtling into my mother's arms and sobbing uncontrollably. She held and soothed me like I was 5, not 17, rocking me in her arms. I told her what happened. I told her how sorry I was I didn't listen to her, that I thought I knew better. "It's okay, little lamb," she said, reverting to my childhood nickname. "Do you think I wasn't an obnoxious teenager at one point too? The same thing happened to me when I first came back home. But luckily, your grandfather was around to befuddle her senses. She wouldn't really hurt kin," he told me then, but he also sounded very uncertain when he said it. However, Grandpa did teach me how to track her and put her back to sleep. And now it's your turn to learn. It'll be hard. She has a really big head start, so we better get hunting. Mom told me this was our family secret, our family curse, and not to tell a soul. But I'm disobeying her again to tell this story, to warn everyone. Whoever you are, wherever you are, please be quiet. My grandmother is awake and I don't know where she is. I started losing time when I was 10. I remember it clearly. I woke up and looked at the clock. 7:32 a.m. I went over to the closet and started picking out what I'd wear to school. A few minutes later, my mom poked her head in. "We need to leave or we're going to be late." I glanced at the clock. 8:32. At the time, I didn't think much of it. I thought I looked at the clock, fallen back asleep somehow, and then gotten out of bed. Or maybe it was some kind of daylight savings thing. But then it kept happening. When I was 12, I lost time on a field trip to the Museum of Natural History. I drifted away from the group to look at the mineral collection. What felt like 10 minutes of staring at a slab of malachite was actually 3 hours. 2 police officers found me. I wasn't allowed on any more field trips after that. At 16, I was supposed to meet a crush at the school dance. I went to the bathroom, only to come out and find him dancing with someone else. 2 hours later. At 22, I lost half a day after a heavy night of partying. I told myself it was the alcohol, that I just blacked out, but I knew better. At 25, I missed a friend's entire wedding while getting ready. At 28, I unwillingly spent 2 hours in the bathtub while getting ready for a date with my now husband. My fingers were so pruny. And then, a year ago, there was the incident. I went into the kitchen to grab a snack while watching my 2 sons. After grabbing a handful of chocolate chips, I glanced at the oven clock. It was 45 minutes later. I ran out of the kitchen, screaming my sons' names, but they were okay. They could have drowned, run away, fallen down, died, but instead, they were pouring chocolate milk onto the rug and stomping in it, laughing. That was what spurred me to act. I saw a psychiatrist, a sleep specialist, to test for narcolepsy. I saw every kind of doctor I could think of. They did MRIs, EKGs, every kind of test. They found nothing. so I decided to study it myself. I got a journal and started writing down each episode, when it happened, for how long, what I was doing at the time, what I'd eaten, drank. There isn't really a pattern, I told my husband. I mean, it only happens while I'm alone, but that's the only common thread. There's gotta be a pattern. Let me have a look. My husband Adam is a man of science. Everything can be empirically proven. According to him, life all comes down to numbers, equations. There's no room for the unexplained. There isn't a pattern, I said, handing him the little black book. There's gotta be. He sat in the armchair for a good 20 minutes, flipping through the pages. I sat there awkward, a feeling of unease clenching my stomach. They're getting more frequent, he muttered, not looking up. I knew that already. I just didn't want to say it out loud. I'd had 3 episodes just in the past 6 months, as many as I'd had in my entire 20s. I was scared. He blew out a breath. I don't know what to tell you, Becca. You're right. I don't see an obvious pattern. So we are back to square one. Over the coming months, the incidents grew closer together. 2 months apart, then 3 weeks, then 4 days. I started refusing to go anywhere alone, for fear I'd lose time. Is this really necessary? Adam asked, as he accompanied me to the bathroom. Yes, I replied, through the crack in the door. Can we just close the door? I'll keep checking on you, every 5 minutes. Promise. Okay? Promise? Promise. I got out of the bathroom 2.5 hours later. Adam was sitting on the floor, pale and panicked, holding a bent bobby pin. I kept calling out to you. After about 10 minutes, you didn't answer. So I got this bobby pin and I thought I'd pick the lock, but I couldn't. And I sat on the floor and hugged him. It's okay, I whispered. It's not okay. I have to admit, there was a part of me that didn't believe you. I mean, that was the only explanation. And he faltered. I'm so sorry. It's okay. Somehow, that made me feel better, stronger. I had to be strong for him. I had to beat this. Why don't we go out this weekend? Family outing. I forced a laugh. Then I won't be alone. That sounds nice, he said. It had been a while since we'd been out. This problem had consumed us, eating our sanity and our time until there was nothing left. On Friday evening, I put on a little makeup, my favorite outfit, and then we packed up the car. Where are we going? Ben asked. I want to watch TV, Liam said. We're going to have a nice dinner, and then we're going to walk around and see all the Christmas decorations in town. That sounds boring, Liam said. It's so cold, Ben added. I clicked the straps of the car seat into place. It'll be fun, I promise. I got in the driver's seat. Adam got in beside me, and then we were off. I started up the car, pulled out of the driveway. We were halfway there when it happened. An 18-wheeler in the other direction, headlights blazing, going too fast for the icy weather. It swerved over the line. No, no, no. It was coming so fast, careening towards our tiny Accord. I had no time to react, no time to swerve, no time to click. Darkness. Is this the afterlife? Did I just die? My mind scrambled for an explanation. Oh God, Ben, Liam, Adam, they're all gone. My poor babies, my sons, No, there was something else. Carpet under my feet, the smell of fruit stripes gum in the air, thumping steps from somewhere under me. Huh? My eyes flicked open. I was standing in my room, looking into a closet full of pink and purple clothes. What? I'm back? In my room? I stood there for a long time, close to an hour. Then, click. I was standing in the museum, cold air nipping at my arms, staring up at a slab of malachite, studying the dark green lines that bubbled and swirled around each other. Click. I was standing in the high school bathroom, staring at my reflection, the rolling guitar of Lifehouse's You and Me spilling in. Click. Lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, head pounding. Click. Standing in front of a mirror, wearing a royal blue dress. Click. Laying in the bathtub. Click. Standing in the kitchen, staring at the oven clock, chocolate chips melting in my hand. Click, click, click. All the time I'd lost, dumped on me all at once. Hours, days, happening all in the span of milliseconds. My life flashing before my eyes. And time, the time I needed to think. My eyes snapped open. The truck was roaring towards us. Immediately, I jerked the steering wheel. We careened into the grass. The truck slammed by, tires screeching on the asphalt. We wheeled through the mud, then rolled to a stop. I looked at my husband. He stared at me, breathless and pale from the passenger seat. I turned around. Both of our sons stared back at me, wide-eyed, trapped into their car seats. Ben spoke first. "Can we do that again?" I broke into laughter, soft at first, then loud, manic, freeing as relief spilled over me. No, we can't. The title really says it all. I mean, it's not exactly odd to go to McDonald's at 3 a.m. I'm sure we've all been there, hungry in the middle of the night, wanting something, and a burger seems the greatest option, especially when it's cheap. That was my case. A few months back, I had horrible pregnancy cravings, and my boyfriend was at work and wasn't able to stop and get me one. But they were so bad. I ended up deciding it'd be best if I just got up and walked the half mile to get there. So I did. I grabbed my phone and a zip-up and made my way for the McDonald's down the street. I didn't feel a need to grab any keys or a knife. All that mattered was this craving to go away. And something that would have normally taken me 5 or 10 minutes took me 30. I couldn't help but feel I was being followed. It was just that subtle feeling, like the chills. My body would jolt when I got this feeling. I've had it all my life, and nothing really ever explained it other than chills. And getting into my later years in life, I got them less and less, so this time I was listening. Bodies send out signals. We should listen to them. That type of thing. So I did, and boy was I glad. I turned around and saw one of my neighbors, who has recently moved in, trailing behind. I've never had a bad encounter with him before. His name is Ed, and he's the most average person you'd ever see. Boring to look, not in a mean way. There just isn't anything recognizable about him. Nothing to know. He doesn't give off bad vibes, but staring at him in the darkness of the night doesn't give off good vibes either. I was really beating myself up for not carrying a weapon with me now, and because of this story, I carry everywhere I go, including the fact that my child, unborn at the time, is really young and I am a defenseless petite woman. So I did the next best thing and tried making conversation. Tired or hungry? I laughed. He didn't respond at first. Then he grunted. Haha, just restless. Sometimes sleep is hard to come across these days. He sounded oddly normal. Tell me about it. This one is kicking around a lot, I said, gesturing towards my belly. I didn't receive a response, so I could only assume he was gone. But it was only moments later I felt arms wrap around me and pull me backwards. My flight or fight response kicked in, and I started thrashing to get free. Everything in my mind faded, and the only thing that really mattered was getting safely out of this situation because I didn't want my child harmed in any way. I scratched at his hands. They were pressing my chest down with major force, and to no avail, he didn't let go. I threw my arms around, not sure what to do with them, before I started reaching for his head. I jammed my thumb into his eyeball, and he finally let go. I didn't think twice before running the rest of the way to McDonald's. It was my best bet. Once I got there, the teenager behind the counter looked at me like I was a ghost. After sobbing for 15 minutes, I got him to lend me his phone. I dialed for the police, and eventually they showed up. Leave it to the police department to even remotely care about the well-being of someone else. I explained everything that happened, earning looks from the police officers. They made me take them to where I was attacked. The blood trail led into the woods. No way in hell I was going in there. My boyfriend showed up and took me home. Flash forward to a few weeks later, and I mean months. The police came to me with some news. Ed, whose actual name was Ed, was wanted in another country for murder. He was a serial killer, and when he fled to America, he had murdered 9 more people. They found him deep in the woods of Alaska, in a cabin, missing one eye. This isn't a joke, okay? I know how clickbaity the title sounds, but I'm 100% serious. You need to listen to this, and you need to listen to this now. Something you should know is that I'm almost completely deaf. Have been since I was 9, and yeah, it sucks about as much as it sounds. With some freak accident on the road, I barely remember it. Tonight though, I think it might have saved my life. Extended it at least. I'll give you some context. I was at McDonald's drunk with my friend Sarah, whom I had known for basically my entire life. It was about 3 a.m. She had driven us there and she was mostly sober, whereas I was watching the Muppets Christmas Carol on my phone and laughing deliriously. Or in other words, I was completely trashed. We arrived, got a McChicken, whatever. We were just finishing our food when we heard a commotion in the car park. Going outside, we saw a small crowd slightly gathered around one of the parking spaces. We walked towards the crowd, wanting to see what was happening, when an ear-splitting static pierced through the otherwise quiet night air. I ripped out my hearing aids, thinking they were malfunctioning or something. They did that sometimes, so I wasn't overly freaked out, just annoyed. I looked over at Sarah and ran over to steady her as I saw her double over in pain. She went limp and collapsed to the floor moments before I reached her. I shook her, shouting for someone to call an ambulance, and noticing she wasn't breathing, turned her over to try CPR. What I saw? I have no words, no explanations. Her ears were creating pools of blood beneath her. Her eyes were open but unseeing. A toothy grin etched across her face, the kind that's so wide it hurts. I think I might have screamed, but I was far too shaken to notice. I looked up to the crowd, only to see all of them in the same position, collapsed, eyes glassy, ears bleeding, grinning ear to ear. I stepped back fearfully, fully ready to run away. Then I saw it. A cloud of static in the center of the crowd of grinning, bleeding corpses. I was frozen to the spot. I could no longer feel my hands. I think I asked why they were smiling, but I don't know why I would ask that. Who did I think would answer? Then it spoke, and I, despite my complete lack of hearing, heard it in complete clarity. They are smiling because they have received me. I am their god. Then it was gone. I ran back into the McDonald's, locking myself into a stall. That's where I am now, writing this. The cops haven't come yet, but I know someone will come soon. I don't know what to do, what to say. What can I say? I'm having trouble typing this. The blood is dripping onto my screen, warm and wet and flowing heavily. My cheeks hurt. I can't stop smiling. I first opened the app at the dinner table. Even though I'm almost 21, I still live near my two brothers and our mom. Every month we get together for a nice dinner. This particular dinner wasn't exactly nice. My oldest brother, John, had just goaded all four of us into downloading it. Heart attack, Tim said, pushing his plate of steak away with a troubled look on his face. At only 62. Ha, look at mine. Shark attack at 84, my mom said, throwing back her head with laughter. Very creative. John, what's yours? He refused to meet her eyes. Car accident. There's no way an app could predict your death, I said, crossing my arms. It's dumb. What does yours say? Tim asked. I tapped on the icon, which was a clock that had claws for hands. As soon as I did, white letters filled the black screen. How will you die? Tap to find out. I tapped the button. Cause of death. Fratricide. Fratricide? Like, brother murdering brother? Okay, I had to admit, that was a little creepy. I glanced at my two brothers across the table, then quickly focused back on my phone. What does it say? Mom asked. I die at age 20, I said, not willing to reveal the cause just yet. Aren't you 20 next year? Tim asked. No, I'm 20 now. Oh shit, he whispered. What was the cause? John asked. I glanced at them uneasily, my heart beginning to pound. Fratricide. The room went silent. Both of them stared at me, then glanced at each other. Look, like you said, Anthony, it's just some stupid app, right? John said with a nervous laugh. There's no way it could actually predict your death. Right, I added hesitantly. No way. I glanced over my brothers. Both of them were tall, muscular, well-built. I was short and skinny, the shrimp of the family. One of them could easily... No, it's just a stupid app. I mentally scolded myself. When exactly does it say you'll die? Tim asked. I found the countdown tab and tapped it. A little timer appeared on the screen. 0 days, 0 hours, 26 minutes. Holy shit. In 26 minutes. The room went silent. Even Mom looked worried. Her gray eyebrows furrowed. Well, the app is just a stupid prank, John said, swishing one of his enormous hands through the air. I imagined those hands around my neck, squeezing the air out, the world growing dark. Yeah, don't worry about it, man, Tim said, getting up with his plate. The steak knife sparkled in the overhead lights, and I imagined him grabbing it, charging at me, plunging it into my throat. John, wanna help me clear the dishes? He nodded. And then it was just Mom and I, sitting across from each other. She must have read the worry on my face, because she reached across and squeezed my arm. The app is just for entertainment, Anthony. It's not real. I lowered my voice to a whisper. If it's for entertainment, why would it say fratricide? I bet half the people who downloaded it don't even know what the word means. Dishes clinked softly from the kitchen. And you know that things have been rocky with John and Tim lately. John's furious about the will, even now, after he showed up that one time. He was drunk. Mom interjected. He's sober now. He had a knife. I whispered. It wasn't a knife. It was a Swiss Army tool. And he only mentioned it because of you. Okay, what about how both of them beat me up all the time? When we were kids, even teenagers. Roughhoused? Mom corrected. Not beat you up. When I'm half their size, it's beating up. I shot back. I don't even get it. They're the popular ones, with the girlfriends and good jobs. They have so much more than I do. So, you're a little different. So what? I frowned at her. You have a good head on your shoulders. They don't. That pays for a lot these days. She started up from the table. I'm going to the bathroom. When I get back, none of you better be talking about this anymore. I've been meaning to talk to you about something, and I don't have time for this app nonsense. The will, again? You'll find out when I get back. I watched her leave. As soon as the bathroom door clicked shut, the water turned off in the kitchen. Shuffling footsteps. And then two hulking shapes appeared in the doorway. My brothers stood there, faces darkened in the shadows, both of them smiling. I didn't think. I leapt up from the table and ran for the door. Hey, stop! Anthony, please! They both shouted after me, but I didn't listen. I just ran, like I ran when they wanted to roughhouse. I got in the car and started it up, peeled away and sped to my apartment building. I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, but no pair of headlights showed up. I pulled into the parking lot, glanced around, then ran out. My entryway was on the other side of the building, and I sped around the corner as fast as I could. I was so focused on getting inside, I didn't notice the figure standing in the shadows, right next to the entryway. Can you help a brother? A pale face poking out from a black hoodie, blue eyes that somehow looked strangely familiar. Where had I seen him before? Did he live here? I just need some money. Come on, he said, a twinge of impatience in his voice. Sorry, I need to get... His hand shot out from the darkness and grabbed me by the wrist. You have to give it to me. Let go of me. No. His voice was cold and hard. Then he yanked me back. I toppled down. "Get away from me," I shouted, scrabbling away from him. "Give it to me," he snarled, those strangely familiar blue eyes staring into mine. "You have to." "I don't have to give you anything." "Yes, you do," he said, leaning over me. His reeking bad breath filled my nose. "Isn't that what the flesh and blood does for each other? I finally found you, and you won't even help your own brother." And that's when I realized those familiar blue eyes, the structure of his face. Mom's words echoed in my mind. "So you're a little different." She wasn't just telling me I was scrawny or a nerd or a social outcast. She was telling me I was adopted. I pulled my legs up and kicked him hard, where it hurts. He let out a moan of pain, doubled over. I shot to my feet, pressed my fob to the entry, and ran inside. I didn't stop until I was in my apartment, panting, wheezing. With shaking hands, I pulled my phone from my pocket, tapped on the "How will you die" icon. The app loaded, then opened. Cause of death: cancer. Age of death: 81. My grandmother is superstitious. It was only when I lived with her for the summer that I realized how bad it had gotten. She had this huge freaking list taped to the fridge with 10 different rules she had to abide by, and she was making me follow them too. When I opened my umbrella inside, she grabbed my arm and yanked me back. "Don't open the umbrella inside. Didn't you see the rules?" "Oh, sorry. I thought those rules were, just for you." "No. Everyone who lives here must obey the rules," she said in a raspy whisper. It made me really sad. Once Grandma Jan was sharp as a needle, a grounded, logical person who occasionally bought into superstitions and the paranormal. A rabbit's foot here, a penny there. Now it seemed in her late 80s, that part of her had grown and grown until it subsued everything else. With a heavy heart, I walked over to the fridge and read the rules. Number 1. Do not spill salt. Number 2. Do not open umbrellas inside. Number 3. Do not put on clothes inside out. Number 4. Do not clip fingernails after dark. Number 5. Do not break any mirrors. Mostly common superstitions, though the fingernail one was weird. I continued reading. With difficulty, her handwriting grew messier, more frenzied. Number 6. Do not look in the mirror while wearing black. Number 7. Do not whistle inside the house. Number 8. If you wake up to see the bedroom door open, do not close it. Likewise, if you see the attic stairs pulled down, do not push them back up. Number 9. Never let the refrigerator go empty. Always have enough to make an offering. Number 10. Keep the curtains closed after 10 p.m. Do not open them again until 6 a.m. I wanted to tell her it was a whole lot of hogwash, but then I realized it was probably a bad idea to upset her at such an old age. "No problem, Grandma. I'll follow the rules." "Yeah, right." She put me in a spare bedroom down the hall from her. It was a small thing, furnished with only a twin bed and a tiny desk. But I couldn't complain. It was either this for free or an apartment for $1,000 a month. But of course, the money wasn't the main reason I was here. My grandma probably wouldn't be around much longer. According to my mom, she kept getting these random bruises, and doctors were worried she had a blood disorder, and some other stuff I couldn't pronounce. I wanted to spend all the time I could with her. She was still my grandma. Still the one that comforted me when my first cat died. Still the one who taught me how to bake the most amazing snickerdoodles. I loved her even if I had to put up with some weird ass rules. "I'm going to bed," she said as she passed by my room that night. "Sleep well, Chrissy. I love you." "Good night, Grandma. I love you too." I spent an hour on the internet, then put away my computer and fell asleep. I woke up a few hours later, groaning in the darkness. I rolled over to see my bedroom door open. I didn't leave that open. I stared at it, half asleep, too tired to get up and close it. Well, according to the rules, I can't close it anyways. I snuggled up to my pillow and closed my eyes. That's when I heard the whistling, a soft, melancholy tune coming from the downstairs. Every muscle in my body froze. That was one of the rules, wasn't it? No whistling inside. So why would Grandma be whistling downstairs I glanced at the clock. Frickin' 2 a.m. I pulled myself out of bed and walked into the hallway. The attic stairs had been pulled down. The darkness from the attic bled down into the hallway, along with the faint smell of rust and rotten food. Behind it, Grandma's door hung open. I slowly descended the stairs. "Grandma?" The whistling stopped. When I entered the kitchen, it was empty. "Grandma, where are you?" "Over here." I looked up to see Grandma appear from the dark family room, wearing her floral nightdress. "Did I wake you, honey? I'm so sorry. I wanted to get some milk from my heartburn." No, it's fine. I just thought you weren't supposed to whistle," I said with a chuckle. "According to the rules." "You heard the whistling?" she asked, her eyes wide. I nodded. She grabbed my arm in a vice grip and led me back up the stairs. "Go back to sleep," she commanded. Before I could reply, she disappeared back down the hallway, leaving my door open. I think Grandma's going crazy. "Oh, are you talking about her rules?" Mom said on the other end. "I know they're eccentric, but she gets really upset if you break them. And the doctor, he doesn't want us to upset her, you know?" I sighed. "Isn't it bad for her mental health?" We all go a little crazy near the end. Uncle Finley thought the government was tapping all his phones in his 90s. Great-Grandma Beasley always talked about some bat following her around. Just best to let sleeping dogs lie at this point. But the rules are so weird. Mom, like really freaking weird. And I woke up last night at 2 a.m. to find the attic stairs pulled down. I mean, what was she doing? "You know what?" Mom said, a bit of anger tinging her voice. "She lives by herself in that secluded little house, 365 days a year. The only socialization she gets is her weekly trip to the grocery store and monthly visits from your dad and me. Anyone would go a little nuts under those circumstances. Even you. Lay off her, okay?" "Fine." So I followed the rules. I was a good girl and didn't open any umbrellas indoors, do any whistling, or break any mirrors. Sometimes I'd wake up and see my door open in the middle of the night, but I just ignored it and left it open. A few times, when I made my way to the bathroom, I whacked my head on the attic stairs that were pulled down. Once or twice I heard the whistling again, but I ignored that too. Mom was right. So Grandma was a little crazy. We're all a little crazy, aren't we? Maybe time just scratches away all the normality we hide under, and we're all batshit insane at the end. Things were good as I accepted that reality. Then Sunday happened. I was watching Netflix when I heard a clink, then a shout. I threw my laptop on the bed and ran down the stairs. "Grandma?" I yelled, fearing the worst. "Grandma, are you okay?" I found her standing over the kitchen table, sobbing her eyes out. On the table was a salt shaker tipped over, next to a pile of spilled salt. I didn't mean. I just was cleaning up the plates and She could barely make a cohesive sentence through the sobs. "Shh, Grandma, it's okay. I'm going to clean it up now." I felt awful seeing Grandma like that. She was outright sobbing. Her entire body was shaking, as if she feared for her life over spilled salt. I brought my palm up to the table's edge and brushed the salt into my other hand. I was so sad for Grandma, but I was also incredibly unnerved. Seeing someone you love get so upset about something so trivial. It was disturbing. "It's all clean, see?" I said, brushing off my hands. The salt rained down into the trash. "Nothing to worry about, Grandma." Her sobs quieted, and she looked at me with red eyes. "But he'll know," she said. "What?" "Even though you cleaned it up, he'll still know." "Who?" She looked at me. "The spirit of the house." The spirit of the house? Despite how skeptical I was of ghosts, spirits, and everything paranormal, I felt a shiver go down my spine. Wasn't it a legend that ghosts and spirits didn't like salt? That if you surrounded yourself with salt, you'd be protected from them? Propagating a superstition about spilling salt could be a ghost defense mechanism. If ghosts existed, which they absolutely, positively did not. That night, I barely slept a wink. I stared at my ceiling as the minutes ticked by. 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m. It was around 4:15 that I heard something stir. Thump, thump, thump. Soft footsteps from overhead, from the attic. Every muscle in my body froze as I listened to the steps migrate towards Grandma's end of the house. Then, creak. The metallic whine of the attic stairs being pulled down, followed by footsteps. I forced myself out of bed. It took a huge, heaping serving of courage to do so, but I did. When I finally got to the door and pulled it open, the hallway was empty. Maybe the ghost is here, right now, staring at me, and I just don't know it. No, shut up. Ghosts don't exist, you idiot. The back of my neck prickled with the distinct, awful feeling of being watched. But rather than running back into my room, believe me, I really wanted to. I ran over to check on Grandma. Her door hung open, as usual. "Grandma, are you okay?" Her bed was empty. "Grandma, where are you?" That's when I heard a soft sounds of sobbing below. I ran down the stairs, nearly slipping, and burst into the kitchen. Grandma stood in the kitchen. In front of her stood the spirit of the house. Not some dark ethereal specter, not some white translucent ghost. A man, of flesh and blood. His brown beard was unkempt and messy, his blue eyes wild. He wore tattered clothes, black boots, and a yellow-toothed grin. "You've broken the rules of the house," he whispered. Stepping towards her, she flinched and took a step back. "Please don't hurt me," she sobbed. I'm the man of the house. I make the rules. He raised his hand to smack her across the shoulder. No, I shouted. I charged at him. We collided and fell to the ground. Terror and relief washed over my grandma's face. Call the police, I shouted. Now. He tried to wriggle underneath me. I grabbed the nearest thing, a chair, from the kitchen table, and smacked him as hard as I could in the head. The man was a drifter by the name of Harold McCann. According to the police, he snuck into my grandma's house over a year ago. They found his living space in the attic, complete with a makeshift bed over the rafters, books, and dishes that held my grandma's leftover food, the offerings. He'd slowly taken advantage of my grandma, persuading her over the months to follow his rules. He told her he was the angry spirit of the house, and in her sensitive, mentally fragile state, she believed him. He made her swear to tell nobody of his existence, and whenever she broke the rules, he hit her. Hence the bruises. My poor, poor grandma. For the time being, she moved in with me. We have a tiny little apartment near my college, and I've been helping her recover. She's doing well. She freaked out a little when I dropped a cosmetic mirror the other day, but overall, she's getting much better. She even whistles inside the apartment now, and it's the sweetest sound I've ever heard. Last weekend, I went to an escape room. Our company wanted to send 3 of us interns for team building and camaraderie, but because they're cheap as fuck, they booked some dingy one in the middle of nowhere. Your cell phones, please? The lone employee, a woman named Meredith, said, extending a plastic bin. This is an immersive team building experience. No texting allowed. With a few grumbles, we plopped our cell phones in the bin. Here you are, she said, swinging the door open. The medieval room. While Kate and I filed in, Derek stood on the threshold, staring at the blinking red light in the corner. Is that a camera? Here he goes again, Kate whispered to me, snickering. Derek was crazy like that, always thinking that his phone was tapped or the government was spying on his emails. Because, you know, the life of a frat bro is just the most fascinating thing ever. That's just for surveillance, or in case of emergency, Meredith explained with her unwavering smile. Derek shot her a glare, then slowly stepped into the room. The door swung shut, and a lock clicked behind us. The room was small and windowless, as most escape rooms are. Stone wallpaper covered half the wall. The other half was covered in sky, complete with a crudely painted dragon. Banners hung from the ceiling, and a suit of armor stood in the corner. I'm starving. Let's get this over with as fast as we can, Kate said, running over to the bookshelf. Each of you take one, flip through it, see if anything falls out. Derek got lucky. After a few minutes of wildly shaking a Bible, a slip of paper fell out. He picked it up and read, "Take the painting off the wall, and God may save you all." We removed the painting. Behind it was a coded message, and Kate found the cipher taped to the underside of the table. It all went smoothly, clue after clue, until we got to the suit of armor. Put on the suit of armor, and you'll become a charmer. I looked at it, a beautiful thing, made of engraved pieces of metal. It looked surprisingly realistic for escape room decor. They really want us to wear it? I said. Derek shrugged. I'll do it. He stepped forward and yanked the helmet off the stand. Kate and I helped him get the plates over his shoulders, the bands over his arms. Finally, I placed the helmet on his head. "You look great in that, Derek," Kate said, with a hint of flirtation in her voice. "I can't see anything, and it's hot," he complained, ignoring her. "How long am I supposed to wear this thing?" "No idea," I said, shrugging. Kate was already on her hands and knees, combing the floor for clues that might have fallen out. 5 minutes went by, then 10. We didn't find anything, and Derek's complaining grew louder, more hurried. "Can you guys take it off?" he said, his voice muffled through the metal. "It's tight and itchy, and something is poking me in the stomach." "Fine, if it'll quit your whining," Kate said. "Marissa, can you help him?" I walked over and grabbed his helmet. I pulled and pulled. It's not coming off," I said. Kate ran over and started tugging on one of the leg plates, but it was no use. It was like the suit of armor had somehow locked itself shut. I could hear Derek's panting breaths echo inside the metal, feeling heat coming off the armor. "Get it off! Get it off!" he yelled, the armor clattering as he writhed and thrashed. "Stay still," Kate shrieked, as he accidentally kicked her in the head. "We can't get it off if you're moving like that." I ran over to the door. "Hey, we need help in here," I yelled. No reply. "We need help. Open the door." I pounded on the door with all my strength. "Get it off. Get it off." Pop. Kate finally pulled the helmet off. Derek, are you okay?" His face was red. His black hair was wet, sticking to his forehead. "Just get the rest of it off," he yelled. Now that the armor was off, it was like the armor had somehow unlocked itself. The pieces quickly popped off, and when it was done, he collapsed onto the floor. "My stomach, it burns," he muttered, wiping the sweat off his face on his sleeve. Okay, shh, let's see." Kate gently lifted his shirt. We gasped. Across his stomach were red imprints, if something had been pressed hard in his skin, forming letters, forming words. "Check the closet." I bent over, grabbed the chest plate, and turned it over. Oh my god. There were 14 metal letters, sticking out from the surface, backwards so when pressed against the skin, they leave the message. That's sick. "We're leaving now." I walked over to the door and pounded on it again. "Hey, we don't want to play anymore. Let us out." Kate turned to the camera, its red light blinking in the corner. "Hey, can you hear us? Let us the fuck out." 5, 10, 20 minutes went by. No one came. Derek stared blankly at the red light. What if they want to keep us in here, to watch us, to record us? Stop it with the fucking conspiracy theories, Derek. But he's right. If the camera's for surveillance, why haven't they come and saved us by now? She stared at me, nostrils flaring, but didn't say a word. This isn't an escape room. It's some sadistic game. Derek was standing up now. His young face looked at least a decade older. The lines of panic cutting deep. We have to get out of here. Kick the door down, if we have to. Or we could check the closet, I said. No, we are not giving in to their fucking game. but I was already pulling the door open. They ran over. The closet was about 6 feet deep, 12 feet across. It was pitch black, save for the light that spilled in from the main room. And as my eyes adjusted to the dark, I saw the message painted on the walls in bright red paint. How can I escape this room, you wonder? Here's the answer: 6 feet under. I looked down. The floor, it wasn't carpet or wood or anything else. It was dirt. And there, glinting in the light, leaning against the wall, were 3 shovels. Kate began to sob. Derek awkwardly put his arm around her. The only way out is death, Kate said. Is that what that's supposed to mean? I stared at the message. A shrill ringing filled my ears. My vision swam and shimmered. 6 feet under. 6 feet under. I grabbed a shovel. Kate scoffed. So what, Marissa? You're just going to give up and dig your fucking grave now? I didn't dignify her comment with a response. I just started digging. I hit the first body after only 2 feet. Kate began screaming. Derek hit his face, forcing down vomit. The waves of decomposing stench hit me like a truck, but I pushed everything away and kept digging. A foot later, I unearthed a clump of long, dark hair. Stop digging, Kate sobbed. Please, stop. But Derek grabbed the next shovel and started to help. It took us 3 hours to finish. By the end, we were starving, exhausted, and weak. Kate was lying on the floor, in a half faint, half asleep way. Derek looked like he was about to pass out, but we found it. At about 6 feet under, the shovel clanged against metal, and on that metal was a doorknob. It took us several tries, but I was able to lower myself into the hole and kick it open. And when I did, I dropped through the opening and into a damp, cold tunnel. Come on. The rest of them followed. After walking through muck and sewage for an hour, the tunnel opened to the outside. We found ourselves standing on the street, a few miles down the road from the escape room. We flagged down a car and made it to the police station, but by the time we made it over there, no one was there, besides the decaying remains we found in the closet, and the surveillance footage was gone. I didn't plan to tell anyone about this, much less anonymous users on an internet forum, but I've seen the other posts, and I have to come forward. I got pregnant at Disneyland and gave birth there 2 days later. Splash Mountain, Kenny said, pointing up to the sign. You really liked it yesterday. Wanna ride it again? Yesterday? We didn't go on that yesterday. Yeah we did. I shrugged. Okay, sure. I didn't want to get into an argument with Kenny. It was our honeymoon, after all. As we entered, nothing looked familiar to me. Not the path through the cave. Not the hollowed out tree trunk. And waiting in line wasn't exactly fun. I heard a father shouting, "Renee, get over here," a few times, breaking the mood. And this tall man wearing a fedora kept staring at me. He kinda creeped me out. We finally hit the front of the line. The water lapped around the sides of the boat. A thin drizzle of rain fell through the openings of the fake cave. Thunder rumbling in the background, distant and eerie. I didn't think it was supposed to storm, I thought. I checked the weather and it was sunny and 82 degrees. How many? The cast member asked, but then his dark eyes lit with recognition. Oh, it's you guys again. Enjoying your honeymoon? I just stood there, at a loss for words. If we didn't go on this ride yesterday, how come he remembers us? We climbed into the boat, front row this time, Kenny said excitedly, looking around at the water, but his voice sounded muffled, far away. The thunder rumbled again, closer this time. The pattering rain drummed in my ears, like the throbbing of my heart. Chink, chink, chink. The boats climbed the hill, entering a cave tunnel. The sounds faded into the distance. As we sped down the other side, I felt a wave of nausea. Kara, are you okay? I nodded, but as we twisted around the curve, I felt it again. I took in a deep breath of fresh air. Just motion sickness, I bet. We slowly floated around a fake briar patch. I stared at it, trying to swallow the urge to vomit. The thick brown vines curled around each other. Thorns and leaves ran their length, adding realistic detail. Except for one. No, one was just a plain brown vine tangled up with all the rest. As I stared at it, wondering why the Disney artist had neglected that one vine, I saw it move. It wriggled in the water, almost worm-like, almost snake-like. I couldn't make out a head or a tail, a beginning or an end. The briar patch was swept out of view, and the boat careened through another fake cave. "Are you okay?" Kenny asked, but his voice sounded so far away. My eyes fell on more of the briars poking through the cave ceiling. One didn't have thorns. As I felt the vomit rise in my throat, the world faded to black. "You're pregnant." I half expected the doctor to give me a tiny set of Mickey Mouse ears, or one of those big plastic buttons they give out on birthdays and anniversaries, saying, "I'm pregnant." He was a doctor for Disneyland guests, after all. But he didn't. He just smiled. "You're about 2 months along, I'd say." 2 months. I glanced over at Kenny. That's not possible. I had my period. I drank alcohol. And most importantly, Kenny and I had only been married for 3 days. We'd need to order a full ultrasound to get an exact due date, but that's my guess. He tucked the ultrasound probe away. "Now, is there anything else I can do for you?" "No." As we left, he didn't even tell me to have a magical day. He instead hurried over to the phone and began frantically dialing a number on his phone. Must be a busy life being a Disneyland doctor. When we got to the car, the fight erupted. "Explain this to me, Kara," Kenny said. His voice was biting, hurt, angry. "You're pregnant. You've been pregnant for months, but we just got married 3 days ago. What are you implying? Do I need to say it?" He turned into the hotel parking lot. The silence hung in the air, thick and heavy. This has always been a sore point with Kenny. He'd saved himself for marriage. I didn't. I slept with a few boyfriends in college, but I agreed to his little shtick. Agreed not to have sex with him until our wedding night. Apparently, that was a mistake. Clearly, the doctor's just wrong, I said. I swung the car door open. The warm night air blew over my face, through my hair. There's no other way. I didn't cheat on him. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't tempted to. Cutting out all sex for a year and a half is hell of a thing, but I didn't do it. Kenny was silent. We went to bed without so much as a kiss. Kenny fell asleep in 15 minutes. I tossed and turned for an hour. At about 3 a.m., I woke up in the middle of the night to pee. I climbed out of bed. It was difficult. My body felt heavier, somehow. Must be sore from all the walking in the park yesterday. I walked into the bathroom, flicked on the light. I looked in the mirror and screamed. My stomach was round and full, stretching thin the fabric of my tank top. It bumped the countertop, even though I was standing a foot or two away. I looked 6 or 7 months pregnant. Muffled thumps came from the other room as Kenny climbed out of bed. Kara? Kara, what's wrong? He found me in a crumpled heap on the floor sobbing, my arms covering my distended abdomen. I slowly removed them. I don't know what's happening, I sobbed. He lifted me from the floor, his hands on my belly. We have to get you to a hospital, he said, still staring. And then the thing kicked. My whole belly convulsed. Kenny pulled his hands away immediately, as if I was too hot to touch. Then came the pain. A sharp, intense cramp started in my lower back and radiating to my stomach. I screamed again, and Kenny held me tight. Thump, thump, thump. A knock at the door. Thank God. We hobbled over. Kenny pulled the door open. Please, call 911. My wife, she's... He stopped. On the other side of the door were not fellow hotel guests checking in if we were okay. No. They were some sort of operatives, officials, dressed in black suits, grim expressions on their faces. They grabbed us before we could blink, roughly pulled us by the shoulders down the carpeted hallway. I watched the paintings of Mickey Mouse go by, blurred through my tears. Where are you taking us? Kenny screamed. No reply, save for the ding of the elevator. They pulled us inside. We rocketed down. 3, 2, 1, B1, B2. The floors raced by on the screen. There weren't any floors beyond B2. No more buttons. Still, the elevator kept going down. My ears popped with the descent. When the doors finally parted, we were looking into a dark hallway, extended for miles. Take them to the park. The tallest operative commanded. We've got work to do.